What's up? What's up? What's going on, family? It's your man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience live on YouTube, man. I'm your host, Sean P, the author, poet slash podcast host. And tonight I have an incredibly special guest. How you doing, my sister?
I'm well. How are you?
Man, I am excited. I've been weeks anticipating this moment, and I've just been so glad that today is finally here. It's like a birthday. I'm excited.
Well, I'm glad.
Yes, ma'am. Let me do your official introduction. So, family, today's guest is a two-time Emmy Award-winning producer, award-winning author, and the host of Black and Published podcast. Proud Chicago native, she's the author of Beyond Bourbon Street and For Women, both nationally recognized for literary excellence. She is also a full-time writer with bylines in the Washington Post, Essence, and Vox. We're honored to have Nikesha Elise Williams. How you doing?
Hi.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You are smack in the middle of being on book tour. You were here in Louisiana recently. So, what is it like to carry this book baby for so long and you finally birth? And the book is about birth a lot. So, what's the parallel of that? But, like, what's it like bringing the book to the actual world?
It's a long journey, and this book by far has taken the longest out of all of my backlist and all of the titles that I have previously in my career. I first conceived of two of the characters somewhere around 2019. I first started writing in 2021. It's now 2026. So, like, this book has been with me for a very, very long time. And so to see it in the world, to see people's reactions to it, to see their reviews and then posting about it and then being excited that they have it, it's really surreal. And I'm really grateful.
Has there been any surprises on tour thus far? I mean, like for anybody watching this that's a budding writer, what's it like being on tour? What's that like?
It's a lot. And even still, I haven't experienced like the full grind of touring because the winter storm last week kind of rearranged my tour. So I was supposed to be gone all last week, Monday through Friday, a different city every night, planes during the day, the whole thing, and that didn't happen. Um, my two of my events were rescheduled for this week, so I fly out tomorrow. My one event was virtual on Wednesday, and then I did an event Thursday and Friday. And I already don't love flying. Like I like getting to my destination, but like actually the airport, the travel, all the things I have like had to make it comfortable for myself. Like you got carry-ons and luggage and all the things. And so I really don't like that part of traveling, but it's a necessary evil. But it wasn't bad. Like the cold in Chicago is always a shock, no matter
Yeah.
how many times
Oh
I
my
go
God.
home, even though I grew up there. But I was
Oh
ready
my.
for it. But like, you deal with all of those inconveniences because there's nothing like walking into a room full of people who are excited to talk with you about your work. And there's nothing compared to that.
Totally, totally. Let's talk a little bit Chicago right quick. I love to have
All
fun.
right.
We love talking about food on this show. We love food topics. So in Chicago, where is the ultimate place to get the best chicken? It's always a debate. The best chicken in Chicago.
So I can't vouch for it no more, but the best place to used to get some chicken was the Harrods on 87th and State. Like
Yeah,
that was the spot. The Harrods on
yeah,
87th and State at the Dan
yeah,
Ryan right outside the movie theater. That was the
yes.
spot to go and get you a three-piece with some mild sauce.
Man, you give me flashbacks right now. Flashbacks. So in the military, I was stationed in Great Lake, Illinois, in the Navy, and my Chicago friends would come and get me on the weekends and take me to the South Side and take me to the Wild Hundreds and all that, man. And we would
Oh,
go
not
to
the hundreds.
we was in the hundred. We was doing it for
Okay.
real. So they would take me to all the spots and everything like that. But I know they got other chicken spots too. Black owned families and traditions. So I know it's a debate about the
Yeah.
best chicken in Chicago. Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
spots not created the same though. So, you gotta go with what you know.
Right, right, right. So speaking of food, man, the peach cobbler. So I know our sister Deja Phil, y'all, one of my loving sisters on this podcast. Speaking of Life of Church ladies, I know you had mentioned that the peach cobbler story in her book kind of a spark of somewhere for this story. What's the bridge between you and Deja for this book?
So Deisha and I are friends. That's my big sis. And so even though we are friends, I still like follow her around the internet like I'm like a fan, right? And so years ago, like maybe a year or so after Church Ladies had come out, she was doing this podcast and she was being interviewed about the book. And she was talking about Peach Cobbler. And anyone who's read that short story from Church Ladies knows that first line in that story is iconic, right? But she was talking about like she has used that line as an entry point to teach a workshop, a writing workshop about writing your best first line. And it's based off of that story. And so just listening to her talk about that, I then asked myself, well, what would my best first line be? And the first line of what is now the Seven Daughters of Dupree dropped into my spirit, that very first line in the prologue that says, they cut off her head because she ran. Now, mind you, I didn't know that was going to be the first line of this novel. I had an entire first draft with a different first line and all of that and less characters. But when that line dropped into my spirit, I knew this was my true beginning and I knew what my ending was going to be.
Wow, wow, that's an incredible story. So tell me, there's a lot of food in this book, a lot of details of food. So is food like another language between the characters, maybe? And what's the importance of food in your story?
Well, I'm a foodie. I love to eat. I really do love to eat. But I think that food also, like the tradition of braiding hair, just shows you how Black stories pass and how you never know where tradition comes from and where certain foods come from and how different dishes travel with the people. So like you're from Louisiana, my parents are from Louisiana. I grew up in Chicago. I currently live in Florida, but every Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving, I'm making a pot of gumbo, right? And so I wanted to show that, as Black Americans have traveled across this nation, sometimes by force during enslavement and sometimes of their own volition with the Great Migration, their foodways have traveled with them, just like the traditions of braiding hair has traveled, just like you see with the enslaved ancestor. At the end of the novel, there's a scene where her hair is being taken down and we see the seeds and the shells coming out of her hair, the same way that different crops have traveled on our person, on our body, so that we could have pieces of home wherever we were.
Yeah, man, for real, for real. If you don't mind, I don't want to spoil the book. Could you give the audience the elevator pitch of this publication?
Yes, elevator pitch for the Seven Daughters of Dupree. It is a historical fiction novel about the secrets kept between mothers and daughters over the course of seven generations, and it's told backwards in time from 1995 to 1860. The novel opens in 1995 with 14-year-old Tatiana Washington, whom we call Tati. It is her birthday, and before she can go out and celebrate with her grandmother and her mom and her friends, she has to go down in the basement where her mother is doing a client's hair. Her mother, Nadia, has a salon in her basement. And the client of the day is her grandmother, Gladys. And that's who Tati calls Mimi. And you would think that in this basement with these three generations that Gladys and Nadia would be like encouraging Tati and giving her wisdom and passing on what they've learned in life about womanhood and girlhood and all of the things. And that is absolutely not happening because Tati has a lot of anger and angst towards her mother and her grandmother because they're keeping a secret from her. She desperately wants to know the identity of her father, and they just simply refuse to tell her. And so that is the first secret in the line of Dupree women that stretches all the way back to 1860 in the fictional town of Land's End, Alabama, where the first in their line lived. And they don't know anything about this woman. They don't know her name. They don't know where she was originally from. They only know that legend of how she died, as I said earlier, which is the first line of the book. They cut off her head because she ran. And so in that line and in that secret that is being kept from the entire family line, you see that we're going to deal with stories of enslavement and Reconstruction and the Jim Crow South and the Great Migration, as well as topics about passing and colorism, and even the Black maternal care crisis, all in this novel of these seven generations of women until we bring it back home to the South.
That was an incredible, incredible layout right there. For those that haven't read the book yet, you kind of on the fence about it. You just heard it right here, man. It's a lot of ground covered and well written publication, man. Tell us
Thank
about
you.
the origin story of the idea when you got this idea. Like, you know what? I'm gonna do this story about seven women in the same bloodline. Like, when did that first come to you?
That was not the origin. Like initially, it was just Tati and Nadia. I was writing a story about a girl who didn't know her father. And, as I started writing what I thought was going to be a book completely from Tatiana's perspective, I realized she was unsustainable as a character. Like I lost interest with her. And so I was like, well, let me stop with you at a certain point. Let's find out what happened with your mother. And then I'll bring it to a resolution, which is what I did. And so I had those first two generations there in that first draft. And then as we talked about my friend Disha Philia, she inspired that very first line, which let me know that I had a generational story. And so then I knew I had Tatiana, I knew I had Nadia. Gladys was always in the mix, the grandmother. And then I knew I had an enslaved ancestor. So that was four. And I just kind of had to fill in the other three. And I really just kind of asked, the spirit, the guides, God, the Lord, like, who are you? Who are these women? What are your names? What are your issues? Until I got to the seven. And I knew that I wanted to do seven because, being a church child, seven is the number of completion, right? So
That's
I
right.
was like,
Perfection. Yeah.
all right, if we're going to go back to slavery, we'll do seven generations. It's the number of completion. Let's just call it a day. And so that was easy to come to the seven, like to come to the number seven, and then having four and having to fill in the other three. And so that expanded storyline came to me around October, November of 2021. Yeah, and then I started working on it, and I tinkered around with that, like that prologue, even though it's only a paragraph. There are like three different versions of it because I wrote it in my phone initially, and I tinkered with it for a while, and I knew that I was gonna see. I saw Gladys everywhere walking down this dirt road, and which is now the cover of the book. And when I finally started writing this expanded draft, and by like May of 22, then I knew what I was going to do with each character, and it was just a matter of getting it done.
So I love being educational on this podcast as much as I can. So you are a two-time Emmy Award winning in the world of TV and everything. Does any of that world cross over into the literature space? Like even some of the behind the scenes stuff or some of the politics, maybe, I don't know, but is any of that relevant in this world?
I think my career as a television news producer taught me how to work well under pressure and under a deadline. And it also taught me how to write for voice. As a producer on the local level, you are writing for the anchors and they are going to say your words on camera. And so you have to learn what it is they will say, what it is they won't say, how they're comfortable bending a phrase. And that takes time to learn. It takes relationship building. It also takes listening and adjusting. Um, and so learning how to write for different voices. I worked in television for 11 years, learning how to write for different anchors and their different voices and their different styles of speaking and how they would have a conversation or converse with someone taught me a great deal about dialogue and how to write for voice. Dialogue comes naturally to me. I could have people talking all day long, but and it was actually the description and the exposition that was harder for me to come to as I was developing as a writer over the course of like my indie career and trying to get better at having the balance between a dialogue heavy scene and a description heavy scene. I try to have a good balance so that you feel like you see the scene, you're in it, and you hear it as well. I want you to have all five of your senses activated, if possible, when you're reading the book.
Man, great answer. Great answer. Going right to my next question. So for those that don't know, some people are brand new to you, period, in this world. Like they thinking this is your first book ever.
Yeah.
You do have an indie career, and now you have this career. Looking back at your earlier work compared to this book, how would you say that your writing has grown and evolved over time?
I think I'm more comfortable in my voice as an author. In the beginning, I think a lot of authors are guilty of this. You feel like you cannot read other people's books or you cannot read while you're writing because you don't want to absorb somebody else's point of view or somebody else's voice or the way that they do something. And what I've learned as I've developed over these last decade or more as a writer is that I can admire what someone else does on the page. I can admire what so many authors do when they tell a story, but my voice on the page is singular. The way that I'm going to tell a story is singular. I've also seen my growth as a writer, like some of the crutches that I used to have, I don't have anymore. Um, and I'm always learning. And so I always tell, aspiring writers that, you should read twice as much as you write. And when I say that, it's not just because I want you to like inhale all of these books and try to copy somebody else's style, but like when you read as a writer, you are also reading not just for the enjoyment and the entertainment of the story, but also for the craft level and the skill level on the page. And so if I see something done on the page and that I like, I'm going to try it in my own work and see if I can pull it off. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but I'm going to try. And that's how you can get better, because you're reading for the enjoyment of the story, but you're also seeing how they put it together. And I think that's a great thing to try to pull apart and see the sauce and see how it's all made.
That's a phenomenal answer because as a reader and a writer, I find myself more so this year going back to my favorite stories and reading it with a whole different lens. Like, let me see how they pulled this off, how they made this character, how they put these phrases together. I totally understand that. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Were there any lessons from your earlier writing that have stayed with you
I
that you
think
still
the
use?
biggest uh I think the biggest lesson is discipline, and having that real come to Jesus moment with myself about what it is I want, and am I willing to work for it. And like that lesson came early with like my very first self-published novel, For Women. When I first started that novel, it was 2013, and about a year later, I remember being 7 chapters from the end, because I do outline my work. um, and I remember being 7 chapters from the end, and my flash drive died, and I lost the entire manuscript, and I had to start over. I think I had maybe like the first 9 chapters saved in an email somewhere that I was able to dig up, but other than that, I had to rewrite everything from, I guess, chapter 9. And I remember a moment like that. That's a for real come to Jesus moment where it was like, okay, if this is what I want, if this is what I want to do, then I'm going to rewrite the book. And if it's not what I want to do, or if it's not something that I want, then I'm not going to write the book. But those are the choices, right? And so it's either do the work and have the discipline and write the book, or don't, and also don't complain about it, because you know what you have to do. And so, like, that lesson and like that moment in my life is so clear to me about, like, this is like being decisive, standing on a decision, and then working toward that goal.
Man, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a heartbreaking moment right there. Man. I can't imagine. I can't imagine that kind of a choice. That's crazy. Um, let's speak on the business of books, right? For indie and traditional. Right now, you're doing the marketing, the promotion, and we're seeing your book everywhere, way before the release date. So, talk about like the marketing side of it, the importance of that, because some writers think, okay, I wrote the book, it's on Amazon, it's available, like their part is done. But talk about like the work, you know.
I used to think that I didn't know how to market a book, that I didn't know how to sell a book. And, when I self published in 2017 with my first self published novel, I remember making videos and making trailers and doing all these different things, reaching out to all the local press that I could, and trying to get as much publicity as I could around the book. And, back then, Instagram was different, the algorithms were different. We didn't have TikTok yet. I think people were still on Snapchat, right? So it was a different social media landscape than it is now. Um, and as I continued to self-publish, I don't think I did as much to take advantage of social media as I am doing now with Seven Daughters of Dupree and with the team. But I realized that, seeing what my in-house team is doing, because I only I didn't hire an outside publicist or anything like that, but seeing what my in-house team is doing as far as media and, social media, like traditional earned media and social media, is like the same things that I was doing on a much smaller level in 2017. And so that has been validating to my spirit. But the difference is that being with a large publisher, they have a deeper Rolodex. They have more contacts. So they can reach out to like those marquee publications trying to get reviews and all of these different things. They have the bandwidth to order however many galleys and that they did in advanced reader copies. Like I remember when I did my first self-published novel, I think I had 25 advanced reader copies. That was it. And I had to pay for those, but to give away, right?
Yeah,
So like
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
difference in the budget, like,
yeah,
right? It's a
yeah.
difference in the
Absolutely.
budget. It's a difference
Mhm.
in the level of contacts and the institutional knowledge of promoting a book. But a lot of it is the same,
Yeah.
even if it's at a different level or scale.
Yes, I'm glad you said that because a certain guest I had years ago, her book went crazy, but she had books before that, and I said, "What's the big difference in this book versus those?" And she
Hmm.
said, "This publisher put the push behind this project to put in
Yeah.
all the airports and put in the best placement in all the places. Like that was the budget difference that made it not really her writing, but the push."
Yeah, I'm very grateful for my team and my publisher that they have been supporting this book. They are still supporting this book. Um, and I couldn't be more pleased with how they have poured resources into me and into the Seven Daughters of Dupree to make it a success. And so I'm just hoping that, all of the pushing and the begging people to pre-order and the posting and sending it to all the influence and everything pays off in actual sales. So please go buy the Seven Daughters of Dupree.
Please, 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 it's 5 stars. Please go get it. Uh,
Thank you.
I'm not discussing the research process on this podcast. So even though it is a work of fiction, I'm sure you spend so much time, like you said, slavery, Reconstruction, all these things. What was the research process like in the Seven Daughters?
The research was really organic, and like I didn't really realize I was doing research. And I always say that, anything that I've done or am doing currently always prepares me for what I'm going to do next. So a lot of the research I did unbeknownst to me, and it just kind of showed up on the page. And so, like, when I realized that I was going to go to 18, have an enslaved story and I knew I wanted to go to 1860 because I wanted to talk about, it was my way of talking about and paying homage to the story of the Clotilda, which was assumed to be the last ship to come in under the cover of night in Mobile with 120 enslaved Africans in about June of 1860. And, those people were then emancipated after the Civil War in 1865 and created their own town of Africatown. And they were able to tell the story. That's how Zora Neale Hurston wrote her book, Better Coon, featuring Cujo Lewis, who's considered like, the last Black cargo. But there were so many other descendants from that ship, and they're still alive and they still have their history. And I was obsessed with those stories when they found the ship finally in, I think, what was it, the Mobile River, or the Alabama River in 2019. And so I listened to the podcast Into the Depths by Tara Roberts, who talked about that particular
Yeah,
story. I
yeah,
mean, I've met Tara a couple of times. I've interviewed her a few times. I was
love it.
obsessed with that story, and that then showed up on the page with the creation of the town of Land's End and the story of the enslaved ancestor. Where I live in Jacksonville, Florida, there's a place called Kingsley Plantation that was run by a woman named Anna Kingsley. She was kidnapped from Senegal in the late 1790s by a man named Zephaniah Kingsley. And when she arrived in Florida, she was pregnant. She was about 13, and she was acknowledged as his wife. And he eventually emancipated her. She emancipated her children and family, and then stayed and ran this plantation, and that became a refuge for Black people during the Civil War. Her great grandson Abraham was named Abraham Lincoln Lewis. His he was the first Black millionaire in the state of Florida. He lived in Jacksonville on the east side. And in the 1930s, he and his business partners, who ran what was called the Afro American Life Insurance Company, bought 200 acres of land just north of Jacksonville in Nassau County, and they called it American Beach. It was beachfront property, and they created their own beach for Black people to go to in the summertime. So then that showed up on the page. All of that research I had already done for an article I had written in 2020 called Spirits of American Beach, about all of that history. So all of that was just like already in my mind, and just like things that I was interested in, things that I was freelancing about. And so like the historical portions of the novel, I'm a history nerd, so I'm always like reading historical fiction or reading nonfiction books and stuff like that. Like I had read The Warmth of Other Suns years ago and loved
Yes.
it so very much.
Yeah.
And so like all of those things are always like were just all knocking around in my head, so that it wasn't like I had to go do active research for the historical portion of the novel. I think one of the things that I did eventually research, and that I think I found out, I was reading something and it was talking about how census workers went door to door to take the census. And so I had a scene actually in a draft where Evangeline and Emma were going into town to give their information at the census, and I had to change it to make it more historically accurate. So like that was something that I had to correct, but a lot of it I kind of knew, and it just kind of showed up on the page.
How do you balance research with your intuition? Because I know a lot of times we have all this stuff to put, but everything can't make it into the book. So how do you
Oh,
balance?
Oh, absolutely. There's a line that I wanted in the book that I could never fit in. It just wouldn't fit. That was going to reference Emmett Till, just to like have that extra piece of reference because of Chicago in there, and how his story loomed large, and how it kind of helped ignite some parts of the civil rights movement. And I just couldn't fit it into the novel. Sometimes I would go down these rabbit holes, and only a piece of it would end up in the story, where like I knew in the 1930s there was like the boll weevil crisis that would ruin cotton crops, but I couldn't, that wasn't what my story was doing. So I had to acknowledge it. And but it's like three words. It's like boll weevil be damned, right? And I moved past it, like, okay, I'm acknowledging that this was happening, and I'm still doing what I'm going to do on the page. And so I think for me, historical fiction, this is my first historical fiction novel. And so I'm still learning the genre. But for me, the story was going to be what it was going to be. And the history didn't have to necessarily bend around the story, but it had to be acknowledged, even if it wasn't the focal point. And so I think what I did with the Seven Daughters of Dupree is that I made the story of these women the center, and the history is happening to them, around them, with them, but it is not the center. They are the center.
Beautifully done, beautifully done. Because my friends and I talk sometimes about time a book is so like trying to put all this history on you, but the writing is not there as far as the beautiful writing. The story kind of gets stuck and yeah, plot holes. But
Yeah,
this book actually reads very smoothly. It reads well. It's a page turner. You want to keep on going. Like it's well
thank
done.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. So throughout the book, you move through time rather than telling the story in a straight chronology format. You kind of time hop. So why did you make that choice? And was it always that way?
Was it always that way? That's the easiest part of the question to answer. I wrote it in pieces. Like I literally wrote it in pieces. So if I think about the first draft, I wrote Tatiana's story, I wrote Nadia's story, and then I brought them back together for resolution. And then when I think about when I began to expand the story, I wrote each daughter separately. So there was a different document for each daughter. So I wrote Gladys's story, and then Ruby, and then Juvie, then Emma, and then the enslaved ancestor. And then I brought them together. And in bringing them together, I did not want to do a linear top to bottom story, because that's not how we find out about our history. And my mother is really big into genealogy. She's been, researching our roots since the original roots came out in 1970. And I've watched her struggle as she's tried to find different information and get frustrated because there are gaps, and pieces are missing. So she may have, us in the contemporary time, and then she's got something from 7 generations ago, but something in the middle is not there, right? And so I wanted to show that the way Black Americans find their roots or trace their lineage is not linear. That was one thing. I also read, like I said, I read a lot of historical fiction. I've read generational epics like Yah Jesse's Homegoing or the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fanon Jeffers. And while I
Yeah.
love those books, what they do is they take you from the top to the bottom of the lineage with without a lot of gaps. Miss Honoré has some interludes with well, I wouldn't say interludes, but like Ailey Pearl is her main character, and then you see the different sections and the different jumps there. But for the most part, when you're in the historical portion of Miss Honoré's novel, it's linear. I didn't want to write a linear story because that's not how we find out about our history. So that was one of the things that I wanted to do differently from what was already on the market and also more indicative of how we actually find out about our history. The second thing that I wanted to do was that more than tell a linear story between a time linear story, I wanted to tell a story that showed the parallels between the women. And so as I was writing each woman and each character, I was looking for their similarities. So there's a parallel in from chapter 1 to chapter 2 where we start with Tatiana's birthday and then Emma never knowing when her birthday was, right? That's an immediate parallel. There was another parallel that was taken out of the final draft but is alluded to in chapter 1 where it was like Tatiana's going on this train trip to Washington D.C. for because she's in the 8th grade, that's her trip, and it was going to be it was put that scene was put next to Gladys on the train coming north to Chicago. While
Yes.
that first part was taken out, there was still a parallel there between their experiences.
Yeah.
When Nadia learned decided that she wanted to do hair was paralleled with Ruby's experience of the first time she learned to do her hair. um Jubilee messing with a man she wasn't supposed to is right there with Nadia messing with the man she wasn't supposed to. And so I'm trying to show through the time jumps that even though these women lived in different time periods and they had different experiences, some of the things that they were going through were the same. And if they had talked about them and not kept the secrets from one another, they could have been spared some of the pain and trauma that they went through.
Oh my goodness. Yes, yes. This is a masterclass. Masterclass indeed. So let's discuss mother-daughter relationships in this book. They feel like sacred but fragile. So what drew
Mm.
you to explore that dynamic so deeply, these mother-daughter relationships?
Again, that was not the plan. It's what happened and what showed up. When I conceived of the novel, and as I said, I was trying to write a novel about a girl who didn't know her father. Part of that was to try to explore some of my own complex relationships with my dad. But what I thought was going to happen was that Tati would have anger toward her father or be upset with him because he wasn't around. And that wasn't the case. Her anger was toward her mother because there was no one else to blame. And so she could idealize and romanticize this father figure that she never knew. And she could save all of her hurt and her anger for the people who she thought were keeping a secret from her. And so then through them, I had to explore and really develop why their relationship was not necessarily contentious, but it wasn't good either. Like it wasn't the best relationship. And so, in doing that between Tati and Nadia, that also showed itself between Nadia and Gladys. Like Gladys is always messy. She always has something to say. She's always stirring the pot. She's always got these one-liners that seem really mean and biting. And she never has like a good word for her daughter or even her granddaughter sometimes. And like, where did that come from? And so then to explore it down the line to see each of the women younger and then older, you can see what happens to them and how they change, and how they have to mother on the other side of that turning point. And that's really how I thought of the novel. Like I thought of each daughter as an individual, and I thought of what was their story and what happened to them, what was their issue, as what changed them. So maybe they were more optimistic and more naive and more loving on before something happened to them. And then on the other side of it, there was a hardening. And even in that hardening, they still had to get on with their life. They still had to continue to be mothers or to be wives or to be partnered or to go to work or to whatever it was that they were doing. They still had to continue living. So, what does that look like when something so deeply personal has happened to you, and how do you get over it, and how do you try to heal yourself from what happened while also shielding your daughter and trying to raise her the best that you can so that she doesn't go through the same thing.
Yes, yes. How did you balance tension with tenderness? How did you balance
Mm.
the two in the story?
I think that's the nature of women, that even though you may have a lot of anger or angst or unkind feelings as mothers and daughters, I think there is a level of innate care within us. And so when you see something happen amongst them, they come together, even if they don't like each other, even if they're not really on the best of speaking terms at the time, they close ranks within their family very quickly. And I think it's out of the fact that each mother is trying to do the best by her daughter, and each daughter is trying to understand her mother. And they don't always get there, but they try, and they continue to try. And even though almost doesn't count, as Brandy says, the effort is still there.
Yeah, sure, sure. Let me ask you about the power of hair in this story. Is the powerful through line throughout the story from the hair shop itself to texture to identity? What's the importance of hair represented in these women for this story?
Oh goodness. I think that hair has always been a contentious subject and issue in the Black community, and that's for men and women. With the enslaved ancestor in particular, it plays one role, and it even references, I don't say it explicitly, but like there's a line where one of the white sons of the slave owner says, like, have you ever seen her without a wrap on her hair? Referencing the Tignon laws that used to be in existence that forced Black women to cover their hair to show their lower status and to make them deferential to white people. Um, and so thinking about how hair texture is a signifier of social status, just like how skin color is a signifier of some kind of social status, um, how we learn to do our hair, how we learn to care for it, whether we care for it, whether we know how to do it. I think all of that history, all of those little idiosyncrasies can be tied to some other part of our history that helps tell this story. And so the biggest question that I had, though, when I knew that I was going to write this generational story is, okay, I have this enslaved ancestor, and I knew exactly what was going to happen to her. I knew what she was going to do, and I knew what was going to be the consequence of that from that very first line. How would she feel so many years later about her great, 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 whatever granddaughter being a beautician? That was the question that I had. Like, how would she feel about that? And so I wanted to show how her choice and her action then rippled through the generations, so that when Nadia says to Gladys that, oh, I think I want to do hair, the immediate horror that Gladys has for that, even though she doesn't know the whole story. Like, she just knows that we don't do this, and you are about to like ruin my family name, even though they've never shared the secret.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna spoil the book at all. It's not a spoiler show, but I want to say this. One of the most important parts to me was about the cornrows being used as an actual map. We've all heard that. It's Black History Month. We've all heard that, and the way you depicted it and broke it down was just awesome, amazing. I love reading that.
Well, that's like when that first line that I keep talking about, I knew that was going to be it. I knew that it was because of the map. I knew, like, I from the first line, when I got that line, I knew exactly that that was going to be the end, and I knew it was going to be because of the map. And that's when I knew that I was in historical territory, because I'd always heard those stories
Yeah,
about how we forged our paths to freedom and the role that our hair played in it. And so I was like, I have to do this. I have to show this on the page.
yeah. Let's talk about colorism. So your book touches on the sensitive topic of colorism. And why is it important for you to include that element in this story? And why do you think it's something that we still battle with to this day in the community online? It's so much back and forth about color.
I think it's the fruit of the poisonous tree of white supremacy. Um, Race is a construct, but it's also been weaponized against us. And so if we could fight each other over the color of our skin and over the texture of our hair and what a lighter skin tone and a looser curl pattern signify to the white world, and internalize that hatred, then we're not ever going to be focused on progress for all of us. We're going to be focused on fighting each other and proving to one another that we are the same and that we are equal and we are good enough. And that's a losing battle, but that's something that we still continue to deal with. So in this particular book, I wanted to address that and show how colorism starts at home. What we learn about ourselves starts at home, and how we talk about our looks and our hair and how we behave because of our looks and our hair starts at home. And some people grow up with a stigma around their appearance, like Ruby in the novel, where some people are doted on, like Gladys was in the novel. And I think you see by the time you get to the contemporary storyline between Nadia and Tatiana, how they look and how they wear their hair has no real bearing on how they see themselves or how they look at themselves in the mirror. They're grappling with other issues, but it very much is a fixation for some of the earlier generations. And that's also because Julie tries to pass for white, which is an entirely different story.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Uh, I know we can't hit on all the characters tonight. That's impossible with 7 characters, 7 main characters. But I want to touch on my favorite character, Evangeline. Tell me about that character and the creation of Evangeline.
The creation of Evangeline, well, somebody had to be there with Emma because Emma's mother isn't there. And so I think that's when Evangeline first appears, is in Emma's section, or when I first created her, was the person who was going to be there for Emma and the person who knew her real mother. And then when I wrote the enslaved ancestor, she was there again as someone to receive the enslaved ancestor and to bring her into the fold of the plantation and try to show her the ways and the ropes and everything, even though she was fresh from across the water, right? And so creating her, I knew I wanted to make her a midwife or a mammy on the plantation. I knew I wanted to have her role be that of someone who knew herbs and was an herbalist and could help heal people who, as it says, delivered babies and closed eyes, and not make her so much like a magical Negro woman, but make her someone who was very knowledgeable in the ways of caring for her people and for her community. And whether that was, bringing life into the world or being with someone as they were taking their last breaths and everything in between.
Yeah. So whenever you're writing these stories, are you the kind of writer that have an actual like a whiteboard with a character profile? Because I mean, it's a lot of people. So do you do that, or do you just keep it in your head the whole time?
So I actually have a whiteboard next to me, but there are no character
Okay.
profiles on it. It's just like
No-
ideas.
Okay.
Um, Most of my ideas start in the notes app of my phone. Shout out to the notes app. And I will
Yeah.
just take notes for months, for years. It'll be snatches of conversation, pieces of dialogue, a little bit of exposition, descriptions. Maybe it's just bullet points of like different ideas, or sometimes I'll do the entire outline in the notes app, like this happens next, this happens next, this happens next, this happens next. And my outlines aren't super detailed. It really is okay, this happens, so then this has to happen, so then this has to happen, so then this has to happen. And a lot of times I might deviate from, yeah, a lot of times I may deviate from the outline and scratch stuff out, like my process is varied. But usually after I have a lot of thoughts in my notes app, I will print the notes and
Yeah.
sort through them and then sit at the computer and try to and then begin and figure
Yeah.
out where I'm going. And I generally have an idea of what that is. And like the project, I'm working on a new project now, and I know I have a first draft that didn't quite work. So I'm revising it with the pieces that did. And so what I've really been doing is I've just been doing section for section, and I'll leave myself a little roadmap. Okay, this comes next, this comes next, this comes next, this comes next. And then I'll write those things, and then I'll have to stop and think about it a little bit more. I'm like, okay, this comes next, this comes next, this comes next, this comes next. And I'm literally finding my way through it. But I always do have an ending in mind. I usually know what the ending is going to be, and I generally know what the last line of the novel is going to be, even as I'm finding my way through the middle. I
Wow.
usually always know the beginning. I always know the
You
end.
did a
In the
long run.
middle, it gets a little wonky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. Man. So some fictional writers talk about their characters talking to them in their sleep, when they're in their day-to-day dealings, their characters are always talking to them. Did you experience that with the seven daughters?
Yes, generally, I would say before this book, I can always see them because it's like a movie in my head, and then I'm just writing what I see. This particular book, I heard them, and they talked all the time and would tell me stories, and they kept me company. And if I wrote something that was incorrect, I was also was told that's not how you say that, go fix it. That's not how
Wow,
I would say that, go fix it. I wouldn't say that,
wow.
go fix it. And it was like not later, right now, like right now. So I did hear them, and I
Interesting.
did I did see them. Like
Interesting.
I like the clearest vision was Gladys walking down the road, and the clearest voice was Jubilee, but they were definitely with me all the time.
Right, right. So now that the book is out in the world, do the voices like just stop, or is it like a continuous?
No, they actually stopped talking before the book was even finished. Like
Oh,
when I wrote, like as I said, like I that portion of my writing process where I was just writing the individual stories before I braided the full narrative together was when they were the loudest, because I was writing their story in a real time and I had never written it before, right? And so once I finished that, they went quiet, like they went away. And it was like,
okay.
and I was like, hold on, we're not done. I still have to put it all together. Like I have to put it together with the first draft. Like we're not
Yeah.
done. Come back.
Yeah. Right.
And so then I remember
Right.
I would be at my computer at like 5 in the morning, putting the novel together. And I would literally just sit there and I would ask them, okay, y'all, what comes next? Okay, y'all, what comes next? Trying to find those parallels, trying to find those overlaps, trying to find which time jumps made the most sense to put the story together. And so after that, they got quiet because they had told me everything. I knew everything, but they were with me for a good year.
A year. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. Let's talk about family secrets and curses. So, white lies can feel harmless at first, but over time they can become dangerous. How do those hidden truths shape across family generations?
I think a lot of times secrets are kept in families because we're trying to protect the living and the dead, right? Trying to maintain someone's reputation. We don't want you to think ill of whoever it was, right? But I think in keeping those secrets or not telling the full truth of who our ancestors were, we do a disservice to our children because then they end up repeating some of the same mistakes unbeknownst to them had if you had said something could have been avoided.
Yes, totally agree. Totally agree. So another thing folks might not know about you, besides this book, that you are a host of your own literary podcast. So many of
Yes.
my friends had no idea you had a podcast. So as the host of a podcast, what have you learned from those conversations that shape your own literary journey?
I learned that no literary journey is the same and that everybody's story is different. And I don't mean just like their book, I mean like their story to their path to publication. Everybody's journey is different. And what they have gone through, what people have sacrificed, what they have put aside to choose to write and to choose to make a life out of writing has been so very encouraging. I started my podcast in 2021 is when the first episodes came out. I started that podcast to give authors, Black authors specifically, but I extended to like Black, Indigenous people of color, to give them a place to come and talk about their work and to make them feel welcome. Because I remember being an indie author and not having many places to go and talk about my work. I couldn't get people to pay any attention to me. And I mean, with so many books being published, both indie and traditional, and the media landscape being so small, there aren't enough places for people to talk about their books, and there are not enough places, especially for people from systemically disenfranchised backgrounds, to talk about their work. So that is why Black and Published exists. And in creating this platform for Black authors to come and talk about their work, they have really encouraged me. They have kept me going. They have helped me through some hard times in my life, even if it was unbeknownst to them. Their books have been a comfort. I've always learned something from their works. And so it's just been a joy to talk about this life with other people who live it, and then now to be on my own journey as well.
And so what you just said, that's the reason why I started my podcast. The same exact story. Being an independent writer myself, trying to get on other platforms and not getting to sit at the table and say, you know what, I'm gonna start my own table. And so that's how this journey started as well. Yeah, I totally understand.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we all have a dream list most times of a dream, our dream guests. Are there any guests that you just wish to have on your platform?
Oh, goodness. I spoke to Tiari Jones this morning, so I was very excited about that for her upcoming novel, Ken. I think one of my dream guests was Kiese Layman. I talked to him last year for his picture book and City Summer, Country Summer. So I hope to have him back on solo when his new book, Good God, comes out. Other dream guests right now on my list are Kennedy Ryan, and I know she's super busy, and so I don't know if I'll be able to get her. And then also up there is Colson Whitehead. He's another dream guest of mine. I'm trying to get him for season 7 of Black and Published. We'll see what happens.
7 seasons. Incredible, man. 7 seasons. So if you could get these guests, would you ask them about craft, life, or legacy?
I asked about all of it. So like the way that the podcast is structured is that, I start talking about, how did they know? The first question is always, when did you know that you were a writer? So to really find out, like, when did this dream or this idea for this career like hit you? For a lot of people, it's childhood. For some, it's not. And then I kind of let them take me where they want to. And if I know something about the guests, I may guide the conversation to where I wanted to go to have them tell certain stories over again. But I usually let them lead me. And so I want to talk about the craft of writing. I want to talk about the business of publishing. I want to talk about the work of art that they created and they labored over with the book. And then I want to get to know them on a human level, even if it's superficial with like superlatives, like who's your favorite book or favorite author. I want to get to know them a bit. And then I do want to know what they think their legacy will be. So I try to cover it all in the episodes.
Yeah. So after being the host for so long, and now you're in the guest seat, do you like being the host more or being the guest more?
I think I like being the host more.
Okay.
I don't mind being the guest. I haven't had anybody ask me anything too crazy, so it's been okay. I know some authors have had like real out-of-pocket questions. I have not, thank God. But I think I've also been really candid about my journey on my own podcast, where like I've done a few episodes where it's just me and the mic and I'm just talking and telling my story, and being really honest. And I'm okay with people knowing me at that level, and the things that I don't want people to know, I don't talk about.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Before we get out of here, you mentioned it a little bit. You have something else already in the making. You probably can't talk about you can't talk about it at length, of course, under wraps, but can you tell us anything at all about it?
It's a contemporary story.
Okay.
It's set between two different locations,
Okay.
and it's looking at how we survive. And that's all I got for you.
Hey, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for telling us that. Before you get out of here, the world of TV and series, they're taking all of these books and making them into movies and adaptations. I love seeing that. Will you imagine the Seven Daughters being a series? And if so,
I
like,
can.
who do you want to cast in the series? You have a dream cast?
I do have a dream cast. If I could have my way, I think Taraji P. Henson could be a great Nadia, and I think Debbie Allen would be a great Gladys, older Gladys. But you have to find actresses across space and time because some of them show up at various ages. So like Gladys first shows up at 2, and then you see her all the way until she passes. So those are two actresses that I think of, and we'll see.
Okay, okay. Well, there it is for your lips to guide ears, as they say, man. But thank you so much for coming to the Sit with the Griots podcast. I loved it. I enjoyed it. Anybody watching this later on, man, give me your comments. We'll definitely answer back as soon as we can. Thank y'all very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks, Tabari.